Hey everybody, Brendan Marcello with another episode of Social Distance here on 24/7 Sports. Our guest is Cole Cubelic, wears many hats, SEC Network. You see him on ESPN, has his own radio show, three-man front in Birmingham on Jocks FM. Cole, you've been a fast riser the last several years, and I'm happy to see it and getting to know you just over the last 7 years, really, when I was covering Auburn. First off, congratulations. And I'm glad to see you on TV providing actual analysis, because I think sometimes a lot of people, and I'm not too football savvy, but you actually give us details of what's going on the field rather than just the normal cliches and generalities.
Well, I appreciate that. I try. It's an experiment that Ed Placey with ESPN wanted to try a long time ago with Tom Luginbill. He was the first one to do it, and they kind of liked the direction of that, the Sideline Analyst. And now you've got Eric Wood and the ACC Network. You got myself. Luginbill is still doing it. You've got Rocky Boyman that's doing it for ESPN. So there's a couple of us out there. It's I think it's kind of a way to have a three-man booth, but it keeps it from being as crowded as a three-man booth can get sometimes. Sometimes I feel like when I watch a three-man booth, nobody ever really gets anything in because everything is just so like boom, 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 got to get in, got to get out. And Jordan and Tom, they know that if either there's something that they want to hear me talk about, or when I get in, it's going to be something that's specific to what I've seen, and they're going to allow me to say that, so I'm going to have time to say that. So I think it works well with us. You have to have guys that buy in. That's the first key. And Tom and Jordan both buy in. And if you talk to McElroy or Pash, they'll tell you they completely buy in with Luginbill. Same thing with Beck, with Anthony Beck and Beth Mowens. They know that Rocky has certain things he needs to do and wants to do. So if you don't have buy-in from the rest of your crew, it's not going to work. But as you know, there's more offensive linemen now or former offensive linemen that are members of the media and that people want to hear what they have to say and want their insight. And it didn't feel like it was really that way 10 years ago, 8 years ago. So it's cool to see it. And it's cool to sort of give that perspective because I watch football people all the time. And it's funny because the first thing I'll make a comment and they'll say, how'd you see that? And the first thing I'll say, well, what'd you watch? I'm like, well, I watched him throw the out route. And I was like, I don't watch the ball. I watch the ball get snapped and that's it. My eyes don't follow the ball after that. So and I believe you have to be trained to do that. I mean, you can't, like some guys I'll watch football with and they'll be like, oh, man, that's so cool. And then 3 plays later, you can tell they're watching the ball again. They're not watching what's happening on the line of scrimmage. I still believe it's where games are won and lost, no matter how much you spread it out, no matter how little you run the ball. You still have to protect the quarterback. You still have to have time to operate, and those plays take time to develop. So I just try to bring the perspective of what I know, and that's the only thing that I've ever really tried to do. You won't hear me talk a lot about coverages and cornerback techniques and things like that because that's not my wheelhouse. That's not where I lived.
Yeah. Heck, they've even written books about how to watch football without watching the ball, keeping your eye off the ball. I've seen it, and I've got one in my bookshelf, actually.
I was going to say, I haven't seen that. I didn't know they wrote a book about it. But
yeah, there's actually 2 of them, I think, by the same author. He did a follow-up. The first one was so popular, and I'm forgetting the name, so forgive me. It was pretty popular about 10, 15 years ago, but I've got it on my bookshelf. Nice. So you see, you're very active on the sidelines during these SEC Network broadcasts, and I know you bumped into a ref. Was it a line judge? Who was it?
Yeah, it's actually Doug Williams' brother, former Super Bowl, or I guess still Super Bowl champion. Steve Williams, he still, I saw him. We had a game together in South Carolina last year. It's one of those deals where I kind of just wasn't paying attention to where the ref might end up being. Got a little carried away with the demonstration that I was doing, and we kind of had that little bump, and ended up being entertaining. It wasn't great when it happened. Not a lot of people weren't real happy about it, but again, you talk about teammates. Tom sort of made that into something, whereas he could have made that a very uncomfortable situation and a troublesome situation, but he immediately turned into something that was very entertaining. And with Arkansas playing Florida A&M, not a very competitive football game, all of a sudden that became a storyline of the game. Not everybody wanted that as far as people involved with our broadcast, but he made it into something that was a little bit more intriguing. So
Yeah.
there was a lot of people that had fun with that at my disposal. The commissioner of the conference that I work for being one of them. But it's, I get random people bring it up all the time. And the first thing I say is, you were watching like a 50-point game on a Thursday night when there was other games on, but it happens. It's something that I learned from, and obviously don't plan on letting that happen again.
Well, your wheelhouse is the SEC, and I know you keep up with much more beyond that, but I wanted to stick with the SEC, at least starting off here. And you look at the offensive lines across the conference. I mean, one that stands out to me, just, my bare bones understanding, is Tennessee. Am I correct in that? Let me know.
Absolutely. I've got
and any other offensive lines out there in the SEC we really got to be keeping an eye on going into this season.
Well, I had Alabama number one. I put out my top 5 SEC offensive lines. Alabama was one. I would have Alabama one in the nation as well.
Yeah, okay.
I think they have a chance to really play bully ball this year if they want to. I think Alex Leatherwood is the, at worst, 3rd offensive tackle in college football. Some people may have Walker Little at Stanford ahead of him. Penei Sewell is going to be ahead of him, but I would have him number 2 behind Penei Sewell. This is the thing about offensive linemen sometimes, Brandon, that people don't realize. When you have a quiet season, that can be good. That's because usually when we talk, unless you're a Penei Sewell or a Quentin Nelson and somebody who just has had so many people talking about you, most times people don't talk about you. And it took people 3 years to get on Quentin Nelson. Trust me, he was doing a lot of that same stuff 2 years before people found out about him. But Penei Sewell's going to enter this season with that Orlando Pace type hype. I think Cam Robinson's probably got a lot of that hype. Maybe a little bit of Jonah Williams, but not a ton of guys get the kind of hype that Penei Sewell's going to have this year. And just because we didn't talk a lot about Alex Leatherwood doesn't mean he didn't have a great year. I thought he had a spectacular season last year. And when people aren't talking about you, kind of like what we said, following the ball, that means you're not giving up sacks. You don't have a bunch of penalties. You're not getting beat in the run game, because that's when the majority of college football fans talk about offensive linemen. So I think you got a great tackle returning. I think Evan Neal's a guy that everyone just thinks is going to move to right tackle. I'm actually not 100% sure that he's going to have the feet to be able to do that. So I think he could stay at guard. And then Deontay Brown is a top 3, top 5 guard in the nation who returns on the other side. Landon Dickerson could stay at center. I think he'll move depending on what happens with Neal, because Darian Dalcourt is a center who I really like. I saw him at the Under Armour All-American game a few years ago, and he stuck out more than any of the guys ranked ahead of him as ready to play right now. So I think he'll be ready to play center this year. So one area that spring ball is going to work against some of these teams, specifically Alabama, is you have a couple of moving pieces, but you haven't been able to work with them yet. You haven't been able to test that, so to speak. So can Evan Neal handle right tackle? Could Landon Dickerson go to right tackle? They haven't repped it. They don't really know. So, and when you have to go test that out, that takes away from your reps as a group of 5 trying to mold and build chemistry and become a great offensive line. So you're right about Tennessee. Tennessee has a trump card that maybe Ohio State's got one in Wyatt Davis. Oregon's got one in Penei Sewell. Not even sure I'd put Leatherwood in that classification yet, but Trey Smith is that kind of a difference maker.
Yeah, Trey Smith, man.
I mean, he's a guy that's fun to watch. He has a chance to be on that level as far as hype is concerned, because he's getting some preseason buzz. And if he had just been healthy, well, first off, he wouldn't be playing college football this year. He'd be in the NFL if he had just been healthy and not dealing with his health situation that he has. But to do what he did last year, having 2 full pad practices leading up to the season, is remarkable. Because the only way to get good at playing offensive line is to do it in full pads against somebody who's trying to make you look bad. I could take you out there and we could go T-board left, T-board right, run through the chutes, push the sled. You ain't going to become a great offensive lineman. We got to get you in pads and do it against somebody full speed. It's the only way. And so for him to progress through the course of the season the way he did and still have the kind of season he did was absolutely remarkable. But you're right. I think Wanye Morris at tackle has a very high ceiling. Now, he had some ups and downs as a true freshman last year. You put the UAB film on, and Jordan Smith got him out of the game. I mean, literally got him yanked out of the game. But he's going to be late first, early second round, edge rusher coming out of UAB. So he's a good player that he was facing, but he's got some real skill. Brandon Kennedy's played a ton of football, Tennessee and Alabama. So you got a veteran center. If Cade Mays is there, now all of a sudden they're really different up front, because you got two really physical guards that can push you around, an experienced center, two tackles that have played last year. So I think Tennessee's in that mix. Georgia's still going to be good. Let's not get too far away from that. Trey Hill's going to be a great center. Jamari Saylor played a lot of football last year. Ben Cleveland, if he's back, is one of the better guards in the SEC, just a physical freak show. And then I think Kentucky's the one to watch out for that probably nobody's going to talk about.
Okay, yeah.
Drake Jackson is a great center. I did see my man Freddie Maggard putting him out as the best Kentucky center of all time. He may have forgotten that Dermontti Dawson played center there, so we'll temper those expectations just a little bit. But Drake Jackson is probably at worst the second best center in college football behind Creed Humphrey at Oklahoma. And then you've got two tackles returning that both played great football last year. Now you lose Logan Stenberg, who I thought was kind of the tone setter for that group, but Kentucky's going to have a really good offensive line this year as well.
So when we talk about Tennessee and their offensive line, and obviously a quarterback, it's kind of inconsistent, but at least he kind of gets it done. Can Tennessee not only be a bowl team, but can they win 8-9 games?
I think so. Now the schedule doesn't make it easy to say that. I think there are some schedules in college football that you look at and say, oh, they can get 8 or 9 for sure. Now Tennessee's going to have to fight for them.
Yeah.
But I look at it in a little bit of a different way. I think some people focus on the first quarter of last season and they say, well, Jeremy's not that good of a coach. But I kind of go to some of the competition that they had that you just knew flat out was better than they were. Take the Alabama games and how competitive they've been in. They were competitive against Florida, even though that score didn't look great. And after that game is when Jeremy called the team meeting and everything kind of changed, and he took care of some things that he needed to. The thing that's different about Tennessee for me is I just believe that Jeremy is that good of an in-game coach. And I think he has that good of a staff. If you went down and checkmarked every staff member against everyone else in the league, if you're realistic about it, Tennessee probably has the best staff in the SEC. Just guy for guy, assistant for assistant, all the way down, resumes, NFL guys, development, however you want to spin it. I think Tennessee's probably at the top of that list, and that's going to help you win games. If they can literally find a quarterback who doesn't throw the ball to the wrong color jersey, I think they add 2-3 wins this year. They were in some game. I mean, look at the Alabama game. Garantino gets that sneak. That's an 8-point game in the fourth quarter against a team that has 200 times the talent that they did last year. I think the offensive line is going to be really good. I think the backfield is going to be solid. Wide receiver is still going to be okay. The depth up front concerns me a little bit. They don't have the depth on the offensive line or defensive line to maybe be as good week 8, 9, 10, 11. If they lose a guy or two, which you're all going, every team's going to lose a guy in the trenches sometime, somewhere. But I wonder when we get to the halfway point and a little bit further, especially with what this offseason was, not having the physical portion of spring ball, does that work against Tennessee? Like, I think they catch Oklahoma at a great time.
Yes.
Because that's not going to be a very powerful front seven. Tennessee may be able to control the clock, maintain possession. That might be a game that and I can't wait to see Jeremy coach against the Lincoln Riley offense. That's going to be fun to watch. Yeah. So I think they have an opportunity to really exceed expectations. They, more than some other teams that we might talk about ceiling and floor, probably need to stay healthy more so than some other teams we'll discuss. But I definitely think because of coaching, because of the top-end talent and some of the experience, Tennessee has a chance to extend a little bit.
And you talk about depth. That's why it's so important for Cade Mays to get that waiver, man. If they get him, that takes him to another level. And you're right about, at least in my opinion, about the Oklahoma game. If that thing was in Knoxville, watch out.
Yeah,
if absolutely. It was. So I don't know if you've made your picks, and obviously you have an employer that you're aligned to that you got to, let your picks out and everything. But is the SEC East Georgia's to lose, or is this going to be Florida's year?
I think Florida finds a way to get it done this year.
I do too.
Now I think Georgia obviously still can. They're going to have the best defense in the league going into the season. But when we start talking about uncertainties, and that may be the key word for this entire season, not just with a position group or a transfer or a coaching staff, but just we start talking about fans, preparation, durability. I think everything right now is up for grabs and in question, and we don't really know what we're going to get. I think we're going to see sloppy football. I think we're probably embarking on the least physical season we've maybe ever seen since you and I have been watching football. Just because I think when the acclimation periods are going to be so different. So you've covered recruiting at one school, so you know what it's like. When you first started doing this, there was nobody coming in January, and there were still a couple of guys coming in August. Like I showed up in August, and we had like 3-5 kids that came for the summer that came in June. And then now those guys are all coming in January, and the August guys are coming in the beginning of the summer. So you get to go through a couple bowl practices, you go through winter workouts, you go through spring ball, and then you're there all summer. And all of a sudden the acclimation part has taken care of itself. You don't get on the practice field in August and coaches are having to tell you where your individual period is, or how you go through the sleds, or how you're going to work your one-on-one routes, or what it's going to be like to go to middle drill, or how you work the reps between the ones and the twos and the threes. All those things are just known. And I think a lot of people lose sight of the fact that those things are sometimes not just known. And kind of like we were talking about earlier with, if you want to cross train a guard at tackle, that takes away from other reps. So now when you have to tell a DB where to go to do individual, where to line up for special teams, how he's going to be on second team punt cover, and where you're going to do that in practice every day, that takes away from reps in practice where you're actually getting better as a football player. So all of those things I think create more and more unknown going into this season.
Yeah, that's why when I hear fans go, man, spring football's become so pointless. It's like, no, that's when you figure out if the guy is playing left guard.
What you see of spring practice is
right.
It doesn't matter because it's the ones for 2 series and then a bunch of guys that you've never heard of, and they go out there and run 4 plays. So yeah, that part is, but it's the parts that you don't see that are critical to what a team is going to be.
That's when guys move from receiver to cornerback and end up becoming all conference guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's when it happens to everyone. So you think Florida knocks off Georgia?
So yeah, okay. So back to Florida. I think when you look at those unknowns with Georgia, with Coach Monken coming in as OC, I am not one of the Jamie Newman is a top 5 draft pick, best quarterback in the SEC. Same kind of talent as Cam Newton. I mean, some of these people are just way out of whack with the expectations. And I've studied him. I watched. Trust me, I know that little walk the dog zone read. They were doing it at Wake Forest. I've seen it. I know it. I watched it. And for the people who say, well, he didn't have – look at the players he had around him. If you actually go look at that little freshman running back they had and a couple of the receivers, they had some decent talent, and his offensive line protected most of the time. And what defenses was he playing against? Because that's going to be very different when he gets to Georgia. So I think he's going to be fine as a player, but just that offensive line's totally different. Matt Luke was a great hire. If you're going to lose to Sam Pittman – bringing in Matt Luke, who has head coaching experience, was a great hire. But I just think outside of the defense, there are a lot of questions that need to be ironed out that I don't know about that Georgia team. And I think Kyle Trask is vastly underrated because he's not flashy. And we have fallen in love with flash in college football, but he's a great decision maker. If you just get a chance to hear Dan Mullen talk about him, he'll tell you that he always operates within the system. He knows where to get the ball, how to get the ball there. He's tough. He can take hits. He'll give you a couple runs every now and then. And then you pop in Kadarius Toney, who's going to be back that can take snaps. Emory Jones can go take snaps. You've got weapons on the outside. Tailback situation is not going to be a problem. And while I don't think the offensive line is set up to be dominant, they got all 5 guys back. And I think that experience is going to be huge going into a season like this because they know the speed of the game, the physical aspect of the game, and they've been in there against live bullets. So they're going to understand what it's going to be like. So that new acclimation period is not going to be as big for that Florida offensive line. And the guy to watch out for, you probably know this kid because of where he used to work, Mohamed Diabate is going to be the breakout player for that Florida defense. I think he is going to be a legit edge rusher, and they might even back him off the ball a little bit, but he is my breakout player for the SEC. And I think when you play that style of defense, you can overcome personnel because you're going to find ways to get home and find ways to make life difficult. So, and I also think Dan's that good of a coach. I think if you're picking in-game coaches, Dan's going to, like Jeremy, he's going to be one towards the top of the list.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I covered Dan Mullen for a few years and obviously have watched him. And the guy is an excellent in-game manager, but also knows how to handle his players in some tough situations. And obviously he's a great play caller. And every quarterback he touches turns into above average. I watched him take a tight end out of Montgomery, Alabama, into a 9-win quarterback at Mississippi State, Chris Relf.
Yep.
The guy's got it, and there's a reason why he's the head coach of Florida right now and has a chance to win double-digit games for a third straight season for the first time since Spurrier was there. So what do you think life is going to look like for you on the sidelines this year? I mean, I think we're going to have some semblance of football, but what do you think it's going to be like for you reporting from the sidelines?
I think it has a chance to be very valuable, very intriguing, very insightful. There was a really cool article in the New York Post yesterday about talked a lot to Michelle Tafoya about things that she might do, might be able to do, might want to do. And I think that even by default, our access could be much different than normal. Now, keep in mind, I'm coming out of working XFL games.
Yeah, man. You're great on that, by the way, too.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it.
Totally different deal where I'm literally going up to a guy after he throws an interception and just asking him or scores a touchdown, boom, right there, and I'm getting a microphone in his face. It's not going to be like that, but I think by default, I might be able to hear things, see things, be closer to things, be around things, fewer people in my way. And then I think a lot of people are just going to want to know what it's like down there because there's not fans. How do we gauge momentum in a game with no fans or 20,000 fans as opposed to 85,000 fans? Because you're not going to gauge it by what the crowd's doing or saying or how you're not going to get the same feelings, the same emotions in a game. So you might need someone to describe that for you. You might need someone to describe, hey, this bench looks defeated, or these guys have a lot of energy. You can tell there's a new spark, there's new life. Quarterbacks rallying the troops. The head coach got in their face. Those things could become much more important in a broadcast when you don't have the feelings and emotions of a normal college football game. So from a social distancing standpoint, from, protective gear standpoint, I have no idea about any of that. I'm with you. I believe we're going to play football. I believe we're going to play something very close to a full season of college football. I do think things are going to be different. That's what I've just tried to tell everybody. Calm down, expect things to be different because it's going to be different somehow, some way, and that's okay. Just because something's different this year doesn't mean it has to be different for the next 50 or 100 years. Right. Just make it work this year, and then we can get back to normal or close to normal. So, and maybe we'll learn some things along the way, kind of like we did in the XFL. I think there were some things we took from that and said, man, if we could do that, or let's try this. I can tell you for Tom, Joey Galloway, and Molly McGrath and I, we learned things from our meetings. Just the way we asked questions because we knew what we had access to that we might carry over into our college football broadcast. So I don't know exactly how it's going to look, but I have a positive feeling that there could be a little bit more value and a lot more intrigue that people on the sideline are going to be able to bring you this fall than maybe what they did in the past.
I'll end it with this. Who do you think ends up going to the playoff? Who wins the national championship? You don't have to name me all 4 teams in your mind, but who do you think ends up winning it?
Well, I think Clemson's in. I think Alabama's in. I have to say Ohio State's in. I think Penn State's going to be a really good football team. I think Minnesota's going to be good again. Last year I said going into the year.
Does the Pac-12 get a team in?
I do not think so.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you why. Last year I said I thought the Big Ten was the best conference in college football going into the season because I thought the middle of the pack had taken a big step up. Mm-hmm. And when you looked at some of those teams in the middle of the Big Ten, they were much – I mean, you saw what Indiana did. Minnesota had another great year beating Auburn in a bowl game. Penn State might even be – they're above the middle of the pack now. We knew Ohio State and Michigan, the regular players are going to be there. Wisconsin was going to be there. I think the Big 12 takes that step this year. I think the middle of the Big 12 – I think that league is no longer laughable. And I think after maybe Texas and Oklahoma or flip Texas with Baylor one year or maybe put Oak State up there one year instead of Texas, I think now you might have 4 or 5 legitimate football teams that could be pretty scary against most teams across the nation on any Saturday. I think Iowa State has a great chance to win that league. I think Baylor with Charlie Brewer has a chance to have a really good season. TCU, if they're not as beat up, has a chance to have a bounce-back season. And obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with Spencer Rattler, but you got a good offensive line, good skill guys coming back at Oklahoma, and a great coach that knows how to get to the playoff. And you got the ultimate gamer and Sam Ehlinger coming back at Texas. So I think you have a middle of the Big 12. I mean, Kansas isn't taking a leap, but they're taking baby steps. So they're better than they have been. And Oklahoma State's got a boatload of firepower, a ton, even though what just happened on Twitter a minute ago may affect that a little bit.
Oof.
But they got a ton of firepower on offense, and they'll be able to score with just about anybody. So, and here's the weird part is you got to have good quarterback play to win in that league. If you look at Oklahoma's schedule, they play a 6-game stretch starting with Tennessee where they're pretty much going to get every great quarterback in that league back to back to back to back to back. That's going to be tough when you're not going to have a great defense, and they're not even going to be as good as they were last year. And Coach Grinch has done a nice job. So I think the Big 12 will be better, which tells me that a team with a loss is probably going to be more forgiven and looked at a little bit better to be able to get into the playoff. Now, I love what Mario's doing at Oregon, and I think he's going to get a team into the playoff. But with what's happening in the quarterback situation, maybe Anthony Brown could come in from BC and be that guy. You lose a ton up front. You have Penei Sewell, but you lose a couple others that were really good for you for a while. I think Oregon's the team to beat in the Pac-12 going into the season. I just don't see them getting into the playoff. And if I had to choose it today, I would say – I'll just say this. A Big 12 team gets in.
Okay, yeah. Now, if Oregon does
Clemson's winning a national championship.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Ohio State lost way too much up front, and it's not just Chase Young. Nobody paid attention to what Davin Hamilton and those guys did. They had a great defensive line around Chase Young and a solid group of linebackers around him, with one of the best corners in college football. So I think when you remove all of that, that's going to be a little bit too tough to replace for Ohio State, and I think Clemson finds a way to win a national title this year.
Well, week 2, Ohio State goes to Oregon.
It's going to be fun to watch.
They'll be fun, but I think Ohio State runs away with that. It'd be interesting.
Yes.
Like you, Cole, I'm pumped for football. I wanted to get here. I just want games. I don't care if there's fans in the stands. I don't care if I'm not allowed in.
The same way.
As long as it's on TV, man, that's all I care about. Cole Cubelic, SEC Network. He's on Jocks FM. Used to be with the Cube Show, which you see in the background.
I got the old logo sheet back there.
Tell me real quick. I've seen your backdrops here in the past. You've got a bunch of flags. What all you got back there in the cave?
It's obviously American flag, and then I think the Croatian flag is backwards. I need to flip that one because I got yelled at for that one. I was turned the other way. So Cubelic is Croatian name. Cubelic would be the correct pronunciation. My father's grandfather came to Ellis Island from Croatia, so that's why we represent the Croatian flag. And then that was my old radio show, Cube Show. That was the logo. We had that behind us when we would do stuff on camera. And then got a little love for the Auburn Tigers over there as well. So that's it. I mean, you can see the rafters. It's like I'm down here in a dungy basement, man. Like I don't have that set up in the office with all the jerseys and footballs hung up and like championships and MVP trophies. I'm down here in an unfinished, dirty basement. That's where I do my show every day. So
I get asked if I'm in a dungeon with this brick wall, and I'm like, it's not a brick wall, man. It's a picture that hung up on the wall. I'm sitting in a bare room pretty much. Yeah.
I guess you could get a photograph of somebody's really nice office bookshelf and then just get it.
Isn't that what the folks at ESPN are doing for some of the NFL analysts I've noticed?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, like Mel Kiper's got I remember watching the draft. He had just a giant picture of what an office should look like behind him.
There you go. That's what we need. That's what we need. People think we're more official than we really are.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Cole Cubelic, thanks for joining us on Social Distance.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.